Where's du har min freon, and welcome to yet another video. A complete and absolute misunderstanding of Tolkien's writings is something that the showrunners and Amazon in general have proved over and over again in the last couple of months, my dear friends. And yesterday, 2 new pictures of the High King of the Noldor, Gil-Galad, were released, and I was one of the only people on the internet who did not let Amazon fool them. Like Anatar tried to fool the elves, and he managed to fool Celebrimbor for a little bit, but did not manage to fool Gil-Galad or Galadriel, and they saw through him right away when he tried to seduce them and make them create the rings of power so that he can rule all Middle-earth. I said that it is like a stupid kid does one task right and is instantly rewarded by the kid's parents. Well, this is what the fandom does when they see one elf looking vaguely like an elf. Among all the pictures released by Amazon, that look absolutely wrong and not at all like anything that would be connected with Tolkien. And many people agreed with me, and there were some people who didn't. And finally, we've got some new information concerning the High King Gil-Galad, who, of course, was the High King of Noldor only after the fall of Gondolin. And this title passed on to him. He was admired by all the Noldor and the other races of elves, and that is why he was able to have this high title. He was, of course, present at the War of the Wrath against Morgoth, after which a lot of elves came back to Valinor with the Valar, the gods, shall we say, the angelic beings that created and shaped Middle-earth. He didn't. He loved Middle-earth very much, and he established the realm of Lindon, which was in the far northwest of Middle-earth. And he was in close contact with the other elvish lords, like Elrond the Half-Elven, like Círdan in the Grave Havens, and with Celebrimbor, about whom I've already made some videos. Celebrimbor also, and that should be known by everybody who's read the books, sent the 2 rings of power, of the 3 rings of power, to Gil-Galad. There was the Vilya and Narya, and he, Gil-Galad, then gave those 2 rings to Círdan and to Elrond, and the ring of fire then passed on to Gandalf in the end, while Nenya was given to Galadriel. But it is not important. That's not the main question here. The most important thing is that he was present during the war or the Battle of the Last Alliance at the end of the Second Age, when elves and men formed an alliance against Sauron the Dark Lord, and Elendil and Gil-Galad, they joined and fought Sauron together, and they inflicted some wounds upon his body, but they themselves received many fatal blows. But thanks to this, Isildur, the son of Elendil, was able to separate the rings of power from Sauron's finger, and thus end, for a time, Sauron's reign. So, it is of course apparent, only from this very brief and simplistic telling of Gil-Galad's story, that he was one of the most important, one of the most bravest elves in the history of Middle-earth. An elf who was so strong not only in his physical and mental powers, but also his dedication and his way of life, that he was only be able to be defeated by the second Dark Lord, one of the most powerful beings in Middle-earth. And it's all very beautiful in one way. It's very beautiful in that, and I have said that many times before, Tolkien's stories, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Tolkien's The Hobbit, and all his Arda writings are very conservatively old-fashioned high fantasy, in that they are about the fight of good against evil. Of course, they are detailed and they are planned to the smallest detail, to the smallest snippet. Tolkien wrote his stories his entire life. He based all his stories on his invented languages. He was a master philologist, a master linguist, who knew about 15 languages. He invented his own languages. He started writing the Book of Lost Tales, which then evolved into the Silmarillion, in the trenches of the First World War. And he was able to rewrite entire passages, entire chapters, just because he realized that in one chapter he described the moon to be in a wrong phase. So as you can see, there is no work of fantasy in the history of literature that would be so detailed and that would be so complicated in its structure and in the way that Tolkien constructed it and wrote it. But in one aspect, his stories are beautifully simple. They are just stories, escapist stories about the good versus the evil. And it seems to me that the showrunners, once again, are getting this absolutely wrong, and they are trying as much as they can to reflect today's world, today's society, today's real world people and real world people's emotions and problems and mental states into the secondary world fantasy, where those things have no place. So we shall look into this short article and interview with the actor who portrays Gil-Galad, and then I will provide you with my take on it. So meet High King Gil-Galad from The Lord of the Rings of Power. Gil-Galad was an elven king, the last whose realm was fair and free. So Samwise Gamgee resides in the Fellowship of the Ring, pulling from his memory a snippet of the fall of Gil-Galad. Bilbo Baggins translated the poem from an ancient tongue and made it such an impression on Samwise that it comes to the Hobbit's mind when Aragorn mentions Gil-Galad. This despite the fact that Gil-Galad fell thousands of years before Samwise's time. That a poem about Gil-Galad persists to the Third Age says much of this pivotal character in Middle-earth's long history. The most influential beats of the High Elven King's story occurred during the Second Age of Middle-earth, the setting of the upcoming The Lord of the Rings of Power. A character whose name means Star of Radiance, Gil-Galad is a beacon of hope and action. As the Second Age begins, Middle-earth is recovering from the defeat of Morgoth, an insidious being of darkness, and the end of the War of Wrath. Weary from the battle, many in the realms of Middle-earth want to linger in respite, believing evil to be entirely vanquished. And this is one of the pictures in question, which, yes, he looks like an elf, very similarly, actually, to Gil-Galad being portrayed in the prologue of The Fellowship of the Ring made by Peter Jackson. Along with some of the other elves, Gil-Galad, High King of the Noldor, chose to remain in Middle-earth after the First Age rather than depart for the Undying Lands. Gil-Galad establishes a realm in Lindon, the young half-elf Elrond often working at his side. Though peace seems to thrive on the surface, perhaps all is not as it seems. Not one to grow complacent, Gil-Galad holds a healthy skepticism about the apparent lack of evil in Middle-earth. Benjamin Walker, who portrays Gil-Galad in The Rings of Power, says he worked with showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay to preserve those aspects of the characters in the series. Gil-Galad has always been incredibly prescient. He's got this kind of elvish spidey sense. What an appropriate way to describe an elf coming from one of Tolkien's texts. He's got a spidey sense of the impending rebirth of evil, Walker says. He always sees it a second before. So when we find him at the beginning of Season 1, he's in a time of peace. But for Gil-Galad, that means something entirely different. That peace and liberty require constant vigilance. Well, he was establishing several elvish kingdoms in Middle-earth. Of course, he couldn't just lie down in grass and sing songs, you nitwits. And I think he's playing the long chess game of the preservation of Middle-earth. Also, we have to remember that these elves chose to stay. They could have gone to Valinor and lived on the elvish Valhalla beaches and lived happily ever after in light and love and ecstasy. It's not really that accurate. I mean, Valinor is not really elvish Valhalla. But elves could live in Valinor and not being dead. Only after they died, they passed on to the halls of Mandos, which were really the afterlife for the elves. But never mind, what does Amazon know? But the elves remained in part to preserve hope, in spite of their immortality, and that they have repeatedly suffered the deaths of everyone they know. The elves still muster hope. They rise to the challenge. Gil-Galad in particular, Walker explained. It's almost like you can smell it in the air. And not only that, he's got this connection with the life force of Middle-earth. So now he's a Jedi. So first he was Spider-Man, then he's a Jedi. He's got the connection with the life force of Middle-earth. Almost as if he can feel the tentacle... What the hell? The tentacles of evil slithering beneath the crust of Middle-earth. And he knows it's there. And so, it begins the question, what am I going to do about it? He leads his people with wisdom and with a sense of preparation for whatever comes next. And as we well know, what comes next is Morgoth's second in command, Sauron. Gil-Galad tries to keep the dark at bay using his myriad skills as necessary. He's a politician, but he's also a warrior. That's how audience see Gil-Galad in the prologue of the Fellowship of the Ring. In the Rings of Power, subtle touches in Gil-Galad's appearance point to those abilities. The stone and gem rings he wears from an ornate set of what are almost brass knuckles when he makes a fist. So, he's got spidey senses, he's a Jedi, and he wears brass knuckles. Okay, and he looks like a kind of Cicero Julius Caesar. Sorry, okay. Wow, the stone and gem rings he wears are ornate set of what are almost brass knuckles when he makes a fist. Gil-Galad's hair is long, like we traditionally see with noble elves. So by this sentence you want to tell us that all the other elves in the Rings of Power who don't have long hair are not noble. That Gil-Galad is the only noble elf in Middle-earth. So what does it say about Erondir, whose hair is almost shaved? What is he then, according to you, huh? Alright. But this is beautiful, look at that. Gil-Galad's hair is long, like we traditionally see with noble elves, but it's shaved on the sides as though he were a fighter. So you shaved Gil-Galad's hair on his sides, on purpose. What the heck are you trying to do, Amazon? Are you trying to make him a lesbian of 2022 or what? What the hell is this? So, wow. We know him as a warrior. We're going to get to see him as a warrior. But he's a politician in the sense that we had, in that he attempts to bring out the best in all of us so that we do need to come together. We can, Walker says. Oh yeah, join and sing Kumbaya, everyone. Gil-Galad's wisdom is earned. He's experienced light and darkness beyond imagination in his long life. His history informs his role as the High King of the Noldor and as a respected leader in Middle-earth. Walker says he has all of this information and he has all this awareness, but he has enough love and consideration to know when is the best to tell people. Do you go on the PA system and say, there's an asteroid coming to the Earth, everyone freak out? No, you build an infrastructure. You allow everyone the possibility to protect themselves and start the project of splitting the asteroid in half before everyone even knows it's coming. That's what he's trying to do, and that's what a good politician does, and that's what I like about him. Again, as I said, this entire paragraph, it looks as if they were writing about today, but also about Game of Thrones. They make it sound very modern. Why are you using metaphors to the modern world? Why are you using comparisons to the modern world? Do you just use these words, use these sentences to explain a high fantasy story to stupid modern normies? Do we really need to drag the primary world into everything? I think that they think so. In the Second Age, one of Gil-Galad's strongest working relationships is with Elrond. He knows the half-elf needs to prove himself. Elrond is thousands of years old, but he has some adolescent qualities. Really? Okay. Elrond is trying to find his place in Middle-earth. Oh yes, everybody needs to find their place. To identify themselves with something, and to find their true them, and to be seen. And in that, Gil-Galad mentors him. Gil-Galad is going to encourage him to take the first steps and the journey towards his ultimate destiny, Walker says. But he does it in the way a loving parent would, which is to allow them to make their own mistakes, or to encourage them to do things and convince them that it was their idea in the first place. Once again, this is not Game of Thrones. All this blabber, all this jabber makes it sound so bloody boring. This makes it sound so boring that if I didn't know it was based on Tolkien, I wouldn't even pay attention to it, because fantasy is not about that. Not everything is a Song of Ice and Fire. The Game of Thrones, or the Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, is special and different in this way. It's really as if you just took the primary world's history and politics and people and added some dragons and White Walkers and made it a fantasy. It's completely different from an old-school, conservative fantasy like Tolkien wrote. Gil-Galad's friendship with Elrond is one of the many relationships he builds in the Second Age, and with Sauron starting to extend his reach across Middle-earth, Gil-Galad needs all the help he can get. After all, much of Gil-Galad's epic story ties into that of the Dark Lord of Mordor in the source material. From his early suspicions of being calling himself Anatar, to becoming a guardian of two of the elven rings of power, to the creation of the last alliance of elves and men. Gil-Galad will fight against Sauron until the end. After Númenor's tragic fall, Gil-Galad works with the High King of the Dúnedain, Elendil. It is with Elendil that he creates the alliance we know that, and I have already explained that at the beginning of the video. And the interview ends with, he has to let his own world have a life of his own. He has to let go, like a parent does, Walker notes. The ultimate last loving thing is to let them go out on their own and to trust that they will do the right thing. Jabber, that means absolutely nothing. You do the right thing. You go, girl, and you do the right thing. And that they will know what that thing is. These sentences mean absolutely nothing. And I think that's why these characters that Tolkien has created continue to evolve. Otherwise, he's just this prescient ruler who's got a lot of experience and can kick ass when he needs to. He's constantly... This is precisely what he is. A ruler who's got a lot of experience and can kick ass when he needs to. And one of the most gentle and genius kings in the history of Middle-earth. Full stop. That's enough for a high fantasy story. We don't need to drag all this Tyrion Lannister bullshit in it. The Lord of the Rings of Power premieres la-di-da-di-da. They are completely misunderstanding what Tolkien was all about. And the pictures, I still don't like them, whatever you might be saying or calling me. And I want to know what you think about it. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with me that this is overly too complicated, overly too vague, overly too Tyrion Lannisterish, overly too modern, overly too trying to be like the Game of Thrones, and not at all like anything that was written in the appendices to The Lord of the Rings, because we know that Amazon cannot adapt the Silmarillion. And that will be all. Thank you very much for watching. The subscriber count is growing. I thank you very much indeed, my friends. I bow down to all of you. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do so. Let us reach the 5,000 count subscribers. That would be a true gift for me. And if you are subscribed already, make sure you are still subscribed, because YouTube has this very bad habit of unsubscribing people. That will be all. Thank you very much for watching. Keep reading Tolkien, my friends. And Namarie.